Permit me to welcome all of you. We're delighted you're here for this event. Please note the date is February 13, 2024. For some of you who were probably planning to come that evening, this was a storm that never happened, and all of MIT closed down by 5. The restaurants closed prematurely, and I don't know, you suffered. And we were unable to have this dedication, this event, so we're going to do it this evening. So thank you for staying with us. So I welcome you all. It's the inaugural celebration of Julian Charrière's first major public art commission in the United States, and we're proud to host you here at MIT, Julian. Very proud. I'll come back to why, even more so today. I'm Philip Khoury. I'm, among other things, vice provost with some responsibility for the arts, and it's a privilege and a delight to be involved with the arts. I'm not an artist, but I have the privilege of hanging out with artists and learning from them. Julian was selected by a committee of faculty and graduate students from the Department of Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences, thank you. We called it EAPS, and please do so because it's a long title. The committee also included MIT staff and architects involved in the creation of the newly constructed Tina and Hamid Moghadam building, which were designed by the Cambridge-based architects A.W. Ark. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Well, they're Cambridge-based in any case, and they've just done a splendid facility building here for us. Julian's Art Commission is part of MIT's remarkable Percent for Art program under the guidance of the List Visual Arts Center, directed by Paul Ha, who is here with us with his team, his staff, who make all this go round for us. The Moghadam building links to the historic green building designed by I.M. Pei and serves as the grand entryway to the EAPS department, also to the Environmental Solutions Initiative. I'm learning all of this very quickly, and to the MIT Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute joint program. So that's a lot. What resonated profoundly with this project, 14-person committee, is Julian's passion for research and exploration into the intricacies of the natural world. His conceptual and poetic approach to his practice provides timely, thought-provoking reflections on the evolving ecology of our planet, and critically, on our human relationship to an Earth increasingly impacted by our presence. His ambitious commission seamlessly integrates into the building. We're thrilled about this ambitious project and to introduce his work to audiences far and wide. It now has joined our renowned public art collection, which includes over 60 major works on this campus by artists such as Sanford Biggers, Spencer Finch, Olafur Eliasson, Agnieszka Courant, Ursula von Rydensward, Anish Kapoor, Anthony Gormley, and many, many others. And lastly, we're also delighted to have in our new lobby space, under the stairwell, the artwork titled There Lay the Days Between by Katie Patterson. She's a friend of Julian's and the department, and the funds to purchase this work were generously donated to the department by the Shifting Foundation. Katie's practice explores planetary history, time, and change, and she worked with astronomers and astrophysicists to calculate the number of times the sun has risen since the beginning. The artwork joins the List Visual Arts Center's permanent collection as a new acquisition. And just today, breaking news, Julian is the co-recipient, I have to get this right, of the Wendy and Eric Schmidt Prize, which is administered by LA MoCA. You all know LA MoCA, and it is for the environment. It's a very large prize, very distinguished prize, and he is now the co-recipient as of today, and he'll be spending some time out in LA, and it's just wonderful. Really, heartiest congratulations. This is just a great thing. And I was just nudging Paul Ha because we like to think at MIT we know how to get ahead of the curve and identify the next generation coming up of talent in the arts and in many other areas. And in my opinion, humble opinion, this is a perfect example of it. This is terrific. It's really wonderful. So now let me introduce the head of the department, not for much longer, he tells me, but he's just done 13 remarkable years, Robert Vanderhilst. And Robert, one sec, he's the Schlumberger Professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences, and as I said, head of the department. By the way, the prize that Julian will share from the Schmidts is with Cecilia Vicuña, whom some of you may know. And while this is a separate, they're not going to collaborate, but they're going to be, I'm sure, in touch. And it's just wonderful that two people get honored, and so generous. Nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And congratulations. I mean, it was also a surprise to me, 15 minutes ago, but it's really wonderful. And it's really fantastic to see so many people here, many friends of the department, and many people that have, contributed to the process that, yeah, I'll just maybe take it up. It's the problem of being a tall Dutchman. And, we started many years ago here in something that became a friendship, and I will talk about it. And also I should then call out Alex and Mayen, who is the chief architect of Mayen Winton Architecture, and Mason is here, and Emily is here. And you guys did a fantastic job with the building, and that of course was linked to the 1% for art that Phil already mentioned. And pretty much in this room here 4 years ago, that's when we first met. And many things, very great things have happened since then. Indeed, the journey that brought us together started indeed almost exactly 4 years ago. Because the long list of artists, about 30 aspiring artists and very successful artists, were shared with the committee on the 31st of October 2020. So that's exactly tomorrow that's exactly 4 years ago. In a series of meetings that then followed, this was narrowed down to a short list of finalists. And from these inspiring artists, which also included, by the way, Katie Patterson, you mentioned her already. She was on that list also, but Julian was selected for the commission. And his work had immediate appeal to the committee because of the extensive use of geological materials and processes, the deep references to climate change and its natural and anthropogenic drivers, and of course the sheer aesthetic power of the work. Julian, as Phil already mentioned, frequently collaborates with scientists, engineers and historians, art historians and philosophers. And indeed his work does not only add beauty, for example, to this space, but also asks questions about us, to us, and about the world that we live in. And this is evident from the contributions to EAPS, which Julian will talk about later tonight. I will not say all that much about your whereabouts, and because people can read it, of course, online, for example, on the beautiful website of the List Visual Arts Center. But I'll say a few things. Julian was born in Switzerland. He studied in Berlin with Oliver Eliasson. He was already mentioned. Oliver also has his work represented here. It's in building 12, for those people familiar with the very odd numbering of buildings at MIT. But it's building number 12, which I should say is out of sequence, but that is a side thing. It's also known as the MIT Nano Building. This is actually not small. His work is actually very visible up in the ceiling if you go there. And Julian currently lives and works in Berlin. He uses several artistic approaches, including photography, performance, sculpture, video, and sound, to address concepts relating to time and humans' relationship to the natural world. His work has been presented in many solo and group exhibitions, including SF MoMA, the Dallas Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art in Bologna, the Langen Foundation, and Centre Pompidou in Paris, and many other places. Julian has been nominated for several prizes, including the Marcel Duchamp Prize in 2021, and we just heard about the Schmidt Prize that was announced just now. And he is represented by galleries in Europe, New York, and Los Angeles. And as I said, much more can be read if you want online. But I just want to add a few personal things, because the journey has become very personal, and I'm really delighted that it took that turn. Because in between the selection for this commission and today's dedication of the work, I personally had the privilege and pleasure of attending many of the openings of his shows and also of traveling to many places, including to Iceland, where in the summer of 2021 we witnessed the eruption of Fagradalsfjall volcano. We spent a few evenings on the mountain there, just mesmerized by the sheer power of nature in this case, and the very good wines, actually, that were produced by Julian's family. So we had a great time, and it was absolutely fantastic. And the sound of that eruption and the breaking of cooling lava feature in a mesmerizing event called, what I refer to as Volcano Symphony, but it's formerly called Stone Speakers, that premiered in Palais de Tokyo in Paris just 2 weeks ago, and for which he actually received another prize, the 14th Sam Prize for Contemporary Art. So if you go to Paris in the next couple of months, I can really strongly recommend you to go to the Palais de Tokyo and enjoy the experience. It's really an experience. I mean, it's almost shamanistic to just lay down on the floor for 10, 15, 30 minutes, listen to the sounds, and just experience the surroundings. It's really very nice. Through these encounters and travels, we've become very good friends over the years, and in the process I gained a deeper understanding and admiration of the way you think and the vision that you have, and of course hence also the work that you produce. And for all these reasons, I'm really personally delighted that we can all enjoy some of his work from your work here that is displayed in EAPS permanently, and that we have Julian to talk about it tonight. Before handing the mic to Julian, I want to thank our friends at List Visual Arts Center, like Paul and Natalie and Sarah, and there's many people, of course, always behind the scenes doing that, for running such a professional selection process and for making it work with the artist. Everybody else who participated in that process, I think there was a committee of maybe 15 or 20 people that met several times to discuss art, and I learned a lot from you, Paul, in that process. The way that works is that, they select the work, and you start with 100, you go down to 30, and in that process you come across, fantastic artists that all kind of have a relationship with the research that we do, and then together we kind of learn more in that process and then select, the fantastic winner. And I also want to thank all the staff from LIST and EAPS to make today's event possible. And with that, I'll hand you the mic, and you can tell us about your work, Julian.
I think that works. Hello everyone. I'm thrilled to be here tonight for the second time. First time was February 13. As you understood, we could not do it due to the extreme weather event that we all survived. But eventually the opening was canceled, and there's something ironic about this cancellation because all the work relates to the climate, to the world, like to this condition which are becoming weirder and weirder as it goes. And so I feel especially excited today to be back without snowstorm, but with extreme temperature. I think we all feel that it's quite hot for the season. But anyway, I'm very, very happy to be here and to officially and finally unveil Everything Was Forever Until It Was No More. That's my first public commission in the US, and I think it could not have been a better fit, actually, to EAPS and to all the research which are being made under this one roof. And perhaps before I go a little bit about the work that I'm showing here at EAPS, I also would like to thank a few people because it takes a village to put together 8 pieces permanently in a department. I'm just going to start a little video so you can actually see something as I'm talking. It's one of the work which is on display downstairs. So I really wanted to start to thank everyone. first and foremost, Natalie. I think in 2021 I got this email from you, or can we have a phone call? And we kind of knew each other, but not very well. And we got this phone call, and then I got this amazing news that I was selected to create something for this extension at IPS and for the building designed by AW Architect. And from there, we went on this long journey. And I wanted to really thank you deeply, Natalie, but also thanks everyone at least, Sarah Ho, Emily, which really have been kind of supportive throughout the project and always enthusiastic. I also want to thank you, Paul, for your trust and confidence. And yeah, obviously, as you all understood, it's an old committee which choose me and invite me to be here. So I don't know all of them, but I'm very thankful that actually I was chosen. You know, I mean, as an artist which really deal with geology, time, and environmental questions, it's a great honor to have some pieces which are going to be permanently here on show. I wanted to also thank the construction department, particularly Lackman Peterson, who was very supportive through the process and always with a great enthusiasm. And actually, some of the pieces were really, really, really complicated, as you will see downstairs. And I also want to thank the entire team of Bar and Bar, which also did a great job and accompanied me and my team along the way. A big thank you to the architect, AW, especially you, Alex, Aaron, Alfredo, and Mazen, because it is really quite something to merge art and architecture. And it was not like a singular art piece, but 8 art pieces that we were trying to integrate in the building. And I think it needed quite a lot of enthusiasm and just trust to actually make a project like this. And I think from day one, you guys saw the potential of the art making a beautiful building. And I'm very grateful for that. You know, I mean, I also want to thank Rob, and I'm very happy actually that we engaged in this journey, which then became a friendship. And thanks for the wonderful introduction. And I also wanted to congratulate you because you recently announced that you're stepping down, and I'm pretty sure that the department will miss you dearly. I mean, there's plenty of other places where we will meet, but for the department it's a great loss, I'm sure. And that's probably for this side of the world, and I'm sorry that it's quite long, but you know, that's the opportunity to really thank everyone. I need to thank my entire team in Berlin because they've been working 3 years on this project, and what you will see here is really just the tip of the iceberg. So there is an underneath hidden behind the surface, and that was quite some work. And I would really like to, from the bottom of my heart, to thank Giulia Dominiconi. Without her, nothing would be here. I want to thank Janos Bergold, who helped with the installation, obviously, and which was with us in Iceland, witnessing the volcano, but also capturing some carbon dioxide. I'll come back to that later. And obviously, I'd like to also thank David Schleschem, my studio manager, who always is there and never missed the chance to give us a good advice. And last but not least, I would like to thank all the fabricators in Europe, and a special thanks to Generelli, who actually made all the work on the boulders, the perforation. That was quite difficult, mostly for the big one. So thanks to all of them. None of them are here because unfortunately, we are installing, or fortunately, we are installing a big exhibition at Aachen titled Solastalgia, which will open on the 28th of November. So my whole team is there and no one could come with me. So yeah, that's for the thank you. I am Julian Charrière, and I'm very happy to be here talking a little bit about my work tonight. I think that, like Rob, I spent quite a long time, you know, caring and exploring our relationship to the underground and trying to bring some story of the underground back to the surface, steering in deep time and looking at planetary atmospheres and systems. And I believe that I approach these topics through a different lens. So obviously here you all know about what I'm talking about much better than I do. you do it through the lens of science, but I believe that art have the power to give us a sort of kaleidoscope which can fragment but also expand our view on the world, and which allow me at least to tell a story about things which are studied here under this roof, but which are not always told on this way, and art gives us the possibility to engage with different senses as well. So I think that my work, as Rob said, resolve around the question of perception of time, how this time shapes our reality, how these reality are constructed, and how these reality shift through time, shaped by the evolution of society and the limit of a human perspective and senses, because actually we are very limited being in the way that we actually encounter and sense the world. And I think that to understand the dynamism of the planet, we first need to kind of unlearn. And then when we unlearn, then we can actually push the boundary of our senses to try to go deeper. And I believe that today we know all that we are in a world in crisis, but one of the main crises is not only environmental or humanitarian, it's a crisis of sensibility, because we lost track and we kind of like unlearn, or we lost our ability to actually tune with the world. And I think that, or I hope that art can create places where we can foster new kinship with the earth and its inhabitants, and we can actually recalibrate our place within the fabric of the world. This question, actually, they were kind of core when I started developing the work, which was when I started developing the work for the new department. And as I was actually doing my research, I found this sentence, and I love this sentence actually on your website. So Eeps is a place where the turbulent oceans and atmosphere, the inaccessible depths of the inner earth, the distant planets, and the origin of life all come together under one intellectual roof. And that really showed the complexity of this roof. And I was really excited to be able to actually create something which could dialogue with this complexity. So my first intuition was that I will not make one standalone art piece, but curate a collection of thoughts which could actually then spread through the building. And actually, that was also in reaction to the architecture in AW, because, you know this building, there's a lot of layers. You can actually see through, but there's a lot of reflection. And all these layers, for me, they were kind of like a metaphor of like the subject matter being studies within the building. And so I decided to create a collection of work which would actually spread from outdoor and inviting you to the interior, but then also bringing you underneath and above. So there's really artworks all around. And I actually propose, because you need to make a proposal at some point, so I propose 8 works, which actually stem from 4 different bodies of work, each unfolding in very different media. So we have 3 erratic boulders, 2 in front of the building. One is actually hidden on the roof. This boulder, I will tell a bit about them. They're perforated. They're called Not All Who Wander Are Lost. Then we have a series of 3 vitrines, which have been integrated within the architecture. In each of these vitrines, there is a wall glow, which has been sanded down and render, it looks like another planetary body, basically, but that's the Earth, and that's the Earth just sanded down. We are all astronauts, the title. And then we have a piece that you might never see. It's a diamond, which was casted within the foundation of the building, pure waste. And last but not least, this film, 2 Hours on an Earthly Pole, which depict different cryosphere at night. This video will occasionally be shown on the big screen, the beautiful screen that you have in the downstairs area. And as you can hear, the work are very different also in the way they appear in the world, but they're all kind of conceptually tied. And actually, in order to make a collection of work, which then became a permanent exhibition, I also needed to find a title, which is quite important. So the title of the piece everything was forever until it was no more. It's actually a title that I borrowed from a book by Alexei Yoshak. And this book deals with something very specific. It's a cognitive dissonance that people experience in the late Soviet Union. Just before the collapse of the Soviet Union, people were having this kind of like sense of a breakdown, which on one hand was unexpected and somehow impossible, but on the other hand, it was also unsurprising. And obviously what I did here for IPS had nothing to do with late socialism, but somehow I think that this analogy of cognitive dissonance is something which can describe the world we are living in quite sharply. I think that we all know that we are living in a world, in a time of collapse, that we actually almost every day confronted with this idea of like collapse, tipping point, no point, like no return point, a climate crisis looming over us, always accelerating and coming towards us. And this sense of collapse rushing towards us shapes our realities and shape our understanding of the world. But I think we also need to ask a question, how do we move forward when time itself becomes a threat? And that's actually this cognitive dissonance that I feel strongly, that I want to call chronophobia. We are afraid of time running out. And that's the idea that I wanted to infuse in the title to actually create a cosmos and a prism to read this different work. Obviously, time is not really running out. We all know that the planet will go on. It's more like the human-related history, which is problematic. And it's probably just the possibility of loss of the stability that we enjoy for 10,000 years that is at stake. But actually reducing this complex situation in something so alarming that it becomes impossible to tackle, that's very problematic. And I think that this future, which once was forever, today we have this feeling is not there anymore. At least my generation, we have this very strong feeling that we are losing something and we cannot cope with this loss. And I think that one of the poignant examples of it are the cryosphere, which are melting at a very fast pace. And I think that this imagery of glacier in daylight, that's why I actually shot them at night, they became kind of archetypal images of the climate crisis. The ice was there once and no gone forever. And there is, a strong destruction depicted in such images. And of course, we should not underestimate the power of images. We should also not underestimate the urgency that we need to address to the climate crisis. But at the same time, I think we also need to walk around this immediate urgency. We need to take as much time as we can, but as little as necessary, to reflect and react. And I think in order to do that, and in order to kind of communicate around the complexity of the world, we need to immerse ourselves within it. And I think that most of my work, at least, have been dealing with this concept of immersion or encounter. Craft moment to encourage a direct and active engagement with a specific place. And I don't like to talk about environment because, environment suggests something which surrounds us, a great outside. It renders the world in something which is kind of becoming a background, or we are just outside of it. So I think that even language struggles to fully capture this interconnected relationship that we have. And today we need to actually learn how to transcend this separation. And so for me, I actually decided quite early on that encountering the world would be like one of the motto behind my work, and that I would actually do field work. But it's not a field work in the, the obvious sense of the term. It's not about exploration. It's really about introspection and fostering connection to different places. And one of these places is the Arctic. And I will maybe tell a bit about this relationship. But before, I just wanted to quote someone which is quite important, or have been important in relation to what I'm saying here. It's the Blackfoot philosopher Leroy Littlebeer, who once said, the human brain is like a station on a radio dial. Parked in one spot, it is deaf to all the other stations, the animals, rocks, trees, but simultaneously is broadcasting across the whole spectrum of sentience. And I could not agree more with him. We need to retune and recalibrate our attention. And that's actually what I've been trying to do with my work the last 10 years. So now I've been looking at that for almost 15 minutes. So maybe I can speak a little bit about my encounter with the Arctic, because these encounters have been absolutely crucial in the development of my work and just in my development as a human being and as an open human being which can actually open itself to the world. I was probably less before my first trip to the Arctic. And I actually owe that to Olafur Eliasson. So we talked about him. He was my professor. And in 2011, he brought me for the very first time to Iceland. And we went on a trip. It was actually just after the eruption of the Eyjafjallajökull. So the airspace was closed in Europe, you might remember. And at some point it reopened, and we made it to Iceland. And as a young student, and coming from Switzerland, being quite accustomed to the outdoor, I mean, I've been outdoor, I've been hiking, I saw that that would be just like another experience the same way that I've been experiencing the landscape back in Switzerland. But once I was there, it was completely different. There was something extremely unfamiliar with this landscape and something unsettling. So I actually started this 100-kilometer hike and had to fully recalibrate all my sensorial apparatus. You're like immersed in a place where there's no orientation point the same way that you know them in Switzerland. There's no shack, no tree, no houses. So you don't know how big things are, how far things are. And actually this had really like a very strong impression. And I really had to kind of recalibrate. And this recalibration opened me up. And that's what I wanted to say, because normally, I mean, I've been in Switzerland to a lot of cryosphere, to glacier, on glacier, but I never was really open to an intimate connection. And the fact that I unlearned to see and experience opened me actually to fully encounter a place. And I actually start to have this feeling that the glacier itself wanted an interaction which was kind of physical with me. And this, it's something which never really let me, and that I've been trying actually to distill or crystallize in different bodies of work, and one of them being this work behind us. So this work towards an earthly pole started in 2017, as I was actually luckily invited on the Antarctic biennial. And the Antarctic biennial was biennial, but actually there only been one, so we cannot really call it a biennial. But the whole idea was to actually go to Antarctica to create work with and for Antarctica. And that's why, and that because Antarctica is a place which only have been described through the lenses of science. So the only scientists, natural science, going there and bringing back stories. And the curator at the time really felt strongly that we needed another cultural approach, and that we needed to kind of give the possibility of other voices to actually narrate this particular fabric around Antarctica. Unfortunately, my work never made it to Antarctica, so I ended up like on this ship with a lot of time, while all the other artists were actually trying to create and react and perform, and I will be just able to sit and stare. And I was staring at the night mostly, because I actually knew the Arctic quite well, but I never experienced the night of the polar region, because eventually it was not the Arctic, but Antarctic. And then I felt that actually our visual understanding of a place was really dominated by certain images. And these certain images, there's not so many of them. I mean, if I tell South Pole, Antarctic, the rainforest, or even a bit further, the Atacama Desert, a lot of mental images will pop up in your mind, but these images mostly are just constructed out of like a few small images that you experience at some point. So I like to I like to describe that as an analogy with atoms. So each atom becoming an image, putting atoms together, molecule together, atmosphere, and that gives you the background of a visual culture. And the background of the visual culture, or the atmosphere of the visual culture in the Arctic, was actually an atmosphere in daytime. And I decided actually that I wanted to try to narrate this place under another light. So what I did is that I actually build a big drone which could carry a spotlight, and then went for 3 years with my team, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months. We stayed on different glacier, ice caps, on water, and we tried to create a portrait, an homage, but also a journey through this landscape. And it was really about trying to crystallize this sensory disorientation that I experienced in my first trip. So the whole movie is actually constructed like this, like a digital diorama, where one take is coming after the other, and it's condensed, actually, this atmospheric condition into one film. But this film, you never really know, is it big, is it small, is it far, is it close? And I think that's actually quite important for my work. And I think we all know, actually, that at least in the West, the Arctic have been quite important and formative in the way we experience the world, because we inherit this view from the Romantic of this dichotomy, culture, nature, the observer always out of the landscape. So after 2011, and before, obviously, 2017, when I did 2000 Earthly Pole, I made another work that I show quickly here because it's important for one of the work, which is Pure Waste, which is under the foundation. This work is entitled The Blue Fossil Anthropic Stories. And that was actually my way to try to invert this separation, bringing the human presence back into the picture and show how like us as active and not passive observer. So what I did is I actually, first I learned to climb on ice, and eventually end up climbing on an iceberg with a blowtorch. I had like a bag with a propane tank and a blowtorch, and for 6 hours I tried actually to melt down an iceberg. And you can say, well, this is not really like an intimate encounter. It's kind of brutal, and there is something quite radical about it. But that's also because, for me, it was so radical that we will still kind of talk about the world separated. And I really wanted to bring that back together and somehow to reconcile the two in this brutal matter. And that's actually a work which is not here in the department, but eventually, when I decide to create the piece which is buried in the foundation of the department, it was kind of like a reaction, not a reaction, but a continuation of this work. So, as Rob said, we went together in Iceland because a volcano just erupted. But next to that, I was also working on a project called Pure Waste. This project is rather complicated and simple at the same time. This project was actually an investigation into different geochemical cycles and how these geochemical cycles penetrate everything, how we are entangled within them, and actually how complex they are and almost impossible to fully grasp or visualize. And for this work, I was actually dealing with the carbon cycle. And I think that I maybe just one step back. So I had obviously already melted the iceberg, but then I also had my epiphany on the ice cap, and I maybe need to talk about my epiphany, where I was standing alone in Greenland on the ice cap at about 5 o'clock. And at 5 o'clock in November, everything is blue. The sky was extremely blue, like this electric blue, but the ice was also extremely blue, and you had this feeling that the ice is glowing from within. And I was standing there, and then I had this revelation that I was not standing, but I was actually flying. And obviously, you all know that I'm right, because you all know that in all these strata of ice, a lot of small bubbles are trapped, and these are actually the memories of former atmosphere, and we are all core drilling within it to actually get the stories out. But this feeling of like full flight, that was something completely new for me. And this actually encounter motivated me to try to create a piece, Pure Waste, where I decided that I wanted to bring the minerality of the sky back on Earth. So I think the 21st century, we have this kind of great rehearsal. We are digging out material which have been buried, fossil fuel, we're burning them, they become atmospheric. We are bringing a lot of CO2 and carbon monoxide into the atmosphere. Doing that, we unleash the spectrum of former atmosphere and we recreate the climatic condition of former atmosphere. And eventually, if all these minerals can become airborne, it should be possible actually to bring them back down. And that was actually the idea. And in order to do so, I just kind of like start to look into direct air capture technology and get to know Swiss scientist, Dr. Aldo Steinfeld from the Polytechnical University of Zurich, who is kind of one of the godfather of the membrane, which gives you the possibility to actually filter CO2 from ambient air. And I then did a process of counter-extraction where we actually subtract carbon dioxide from the air above the ice cap. And out of this carbon dioxide, the idea was to actually isolate the carbon and grow artificial diamonds to actually kind of render solid this minerality of the heaven. And eventually, meanwhile, COVID actually started up and spread through the world, and I was not able to go and do my sky mining anymore, which was actually terrible, but a chance at the same time, because it made the project just more complex and more interesting, I think, because I had to kind of get my CO2 from somewhere. So I decided to invite people around the world to send me the exhalation. So it started quite simply. I sent some balloon to different friends and friends of friends and friends of friends, and some arrive actually eventually in Boston. And then ask everyone to take a deep breath and blow a balloon and send it back to the studio. And then I got all these exhalation, mostly negative, perhaps positive, and I extract the CO2 out of this exhalation. And that was actually a nicer connection, because it was actually bringing or showing how connected we are within this cycle. And then out of all this CO2, and that's kind of like starting to be complex, etc. But I found other scientists, and the other scientists, oh, that's the diamond growing, but the other scientists, they helped me from CO2 to get methane. We had some microorganisms from volcanic vents, which actually digest CO2, create methane out of it. And I had other scientists who had, a plasma reactor, powered solar-powered plasma reactor, and then we took this methane and we took some hydrogen, very excited, and then we brought these two together, and some diamond magically grow. And then the whole idea of the project was that I don't want to keep this diamond. I wanted actually to, first and foremost, bring them back to the place where I was extracting the CO2 in the first place. So I was quite lucky to be invited in an expedition called the Leicester Expedition around North Greenland. During this Leicester expedition, I could actually release 5 diamonds into a glacier mill. And that was my act of reconciliation with the ice cap, but also with the greater carbon cycle. So I hope that actually this piece can be a metaphor and an allegory for things we could all be doing. It's more an allegory, obviously, that's not having a direct impact. You can see here where the diamond disappear and eventually reconnect with the mineral origin. And then maybe we just wait 1 second, but I can start talking about the next project, because I don't have so much time. So the next project, which is here, are these erratic block I was telling about. So these erratics, not all who wander are lost. They have been, I mean, you saw them, they have been perforated, and all the cores which have been taken out of the boulder have been placed under the boulder and kind of like signify a way and give like a new dynamic and a new direction to the erratics. And eventually I've been, quite fascinated by erratics since a long, long time. Actually, since I'm a child, I was actually building a pond in the garden of my parents, and we were digging out clay to make a little pond for some frogs. And eventually, at some point, digging out, we end up bumping into this big rock. And this big rock was kind of like an anomaly within the garden. And I had to learn, actually, that this rock was coming from a glacier that I knew as a 6-year-old, the Rhone Glacier, which is basically 120 kilometers away from where the stone was. And then I kind of like understood that the world was a little more dynamic than I believed. And this, as a kid, was quite formative. And then we had to kind of take a car and some rope, and we could extract the erratic, and I had a pond at the end. But I really like this idea of the erratic, and I did a lot of sculpture. I like to play with them because for me, they are captivating. Erstmal just their name, erratic behavior, erratic geological artifact, erratic behavior like the world today, which is weirding constantly. And eventually, the erratic also have been like a scientific mysteries for ages, and we could not explain them like up to the 19th century. They were just all around, and they were this kind of like magical presence that no one could really understand, neither really grasp. And at some point we understood in the 19th century in Switzerland, I think, because of the eruption of a volcano called Mount Tambora, that glacier could grow and receive quite quickly, and that actually the stone were carried by ice flow, and that this ice flow could spread all around Europe and actually sculpt the landscape that we know. And I think that we all know that this landscape here is also sculpted by the last ice age. And so I kind of like the stone as some sort of like, magical portal to different temporalities. And so what I actually wanted to do here is a play between this kind of negative and positive scientific inquiries with core drilling to understand. But the more you core, the lighter it becomes, but also there is an imminent collapse because there's not much material which actually sustains the sculpture anymore. And then all these cores, which are almost like pages of a book, are laid down. And then within them, you will see downstairs, but you can see on this picture, there's a few metal inserts. And these metal inserts are more like a metaphor for the way we as a species rely on extraction, on a connection also to the lithic world to rise to the momentum where we became a geological force. So you have like the bronze and copper and different metals which are actually punctuating this sculpture. It's not me because I didn't have the picture of me in the pond, but yeah, few erratics. They've been traveling a lot before they came here. And sometimes I show them together with the film, which is downstairs as well. Yeah, and I think that is the one outside, and I hope the vegetation will grow further because the idea was that it's hovering over a sea of green. It's not yet the case, but I'm pretty sure it will be soon. Yeah, and that's basically like the last piece of this collection or this permanent exhibition here. We are all astronauts. This one is 2013, but the very first one was 2011. It's an older work of mine. It was also my my piece of my master at the Art University. And basically, it's a sort of reaction, or like it arises from a research on the images which have been kind of formative in the way we encounter the world today. And we all know that the first, it's not the first one, but the Earthrise in 1972 actually changed the world and the way we see the world and the way we understand our planet and our relation with the planet. And that's also why this title, We Are All Astronauts, because that's Buckminster Fuller. We are all astronauts on a little spaceship called Earth. And what I did here is that well, first what I did is something completely different, is that I wanted to, maybe I go back. I wanted to actually get the physicality of the world at the studio, and I started to actually collect sand samples coming from a lot of different countries, to be exact 192 countries, which at the time were recognized as country by the UN. And I brought them all to the studio, and then I crushed those minerals and made some sand, and then I produced a sandpaper. And the sandpaper was an artwork on its own right. It was kind of like a way to, create a picture of the physical world and of the tactility of our planet, but also a way to show that borders, countries, names, they do not matter that much. And that all that was kind of like a construction which is constantly evolving. And when I had this sandpaper for a while at the studio, then I actually decided to use it, and I started to erase one world globe, and that was actually a performance where I just had this one world globe, and I will erase it with the international sandpaper to bring in contact the kind of, representation of our planet, cultural representation, and then a physical appearance through the sandpaper, and brought them both in contact, sanding down all the borders, all the continents, all the sea, and rendering this globe in a very smooth, to a very smooth state, almost ethereal. And then I was collecting the dust of the kind of physical representation and cultural representation, and I was creating a new cartography out of it that you can see here, and that you can also see downstairs. And yeah, for me, it was kind of like a way to try to show, like this kind of movement across time and space, and how we could transcend border and question the arbitrary lines that we draw in the ground, but also in our mind. And yeah, that's the last piece here. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, I hope you can enjoy the pieces downstairs. I might actually, if we have 5 more minutes, do just a last one, which will come soon into Boston, because I'm invited to be part of the Boston Triennale. And I'll be showing this new piece, Calls for Action, which will actually connect Boston to an equatorial rainforest, or cloud forest to be exact. And you'll be all invited to dial in and call the forest and question yourself what you want to tell it. Thank you very much.
We have some time. If there are questions for Julian right now, we can do it a few. But also we could go down to the atrium where we can enjoy some food and some wine, and we can also enjoy the movie, sitting on the beaches and then ask questions. But we can take 1 or 2 now, and then you can all go down. Are there questions for Julian?
So when you were in Iceland, did you collect any volcanic ash?
I collect a lot of volcanic ash, yes. And I also collect a lot of sounds. I mean, if we have time, I saw there was 7 was kind of, but basically I collect a lot of sound and volcanic ashes, and that's basically the piece that I'm showing at Palais de Tokyo at the moment, stone speakers, which is the result of like 3 years of recording onto volcano. And I create an echo chamber in the museum where you can actually tune in and listen to the earth, and I work with like 5 different Institute of Volcanic Monitoring, and we are actually making live sonification of the seismic data, so bringing the seismic data to the surface, and you can actually lay down and listen to these 5 distinct volcanoes being in a conversation. And I also brought a lot of volcanic ashes, and I did some sculpture with volcanic boulders. I love the basalt and the fact that you can actually really feel how the earth is being born. And I was I'm pretty humbled to have been able to see all this momentum. But when you can witness like a landscape being born, I think you understand your scale within this greater picture. And that's have been, like this experience. That's what motivated me to do work, and it's also really what informed everything I'm doing.
When you were in Antarctica watching the night sky, were there a lot of stars visible?
Well, not many, because actually it was kind of overcast. But what was quite beautiful is that we were on this ship. It was a scientific vessel, and actually they have all the technology like the sonar, the radar, but still with all this technology, they were still using this searchlight. And there was like this one sailor on the upper deck with this big light, and it was kind of like, almost like in a theater of the beginning of the century. It was following like from left to right, and it was kind of empty because we were on the Drake Passage. And at some point, this very first iceberg just popped out of the darkness, and it was kind of like stuck for an instant in the beam of light, and that was a very disorientating moment, because you had this feeling, you all know when 2 trains are going at a similar speed, you don't know if you are moving or the train is moving, and it was the exact same thing, but it was not a train, it was like a berg, and then it disappeared again. And I think that this is also something which I tried to distill in Towards an Earthly Pole, this kind of idea of apparition, almost ghost-like.
Pedro.
I love the story about you taking a concept off, discovering Erratic, and how that turned into fascination and thinking about the glacier contraction. Are there any other stories you can share about your childhood that influenced your work?
There's plenty. There's probably one thing which influenced my work. In retrospect, I think, is that I was a cripple as a child. I had like a very bad hip, and I was not able to walk for more than a year. And then I was actually limping for quite a few more years. And I was obviously not able to have the life that the other kids had. So I was a bit depressed, a bit jealous. But then obviously I did other things like bird watching, like sitting. I was not doing football, baseball, or tennis like the other kids were doing in Switzerland. And I guess that this had like an impact in the way I see the world today, and in the way I engage with the world, and was probably a strong, like kind of background to actually make the work I do today. So it's not like a good memory, and it's like multiple memory, because it's 3 or 4 years of my life, and that's a bit longer, even like 10 years to be very honest. But it's 3, 4 years where I was really not able to move correctly.
I can speak loudly. Has your work with EAPS led to any scientific, artistic collaborations between scientists at MIT and you?
Not yet, but there's space for improvement, obviously. we didn't work together yet.
No, but maybe in Tasmania at some point.
Yeah. Actually, Antarctica, and that's why I prefer perhaps Greenland, is a space which is quite controlled. You're not allowed to do whatever you want. And that's if you're a scientist, if you're an artist, or even if you're a tourist. There's a big set of rules which actually kind of govern the way you can move, you can act. So I was lucky because I didn't have to do an artwork. So I had a lot of time just to sit and look and get this imprint of the place. But there's not really a question of how to start because it's always driven. You need to kind of follow. And that's something that I'm not so used to. So the absolute opposite is Greenland, where you can just, you can start to walk and you can walk for days. And East Greenland, you might need a gun because of the polar bears. But West Greenland, which is much safer, you can really, you can just really lose yourself. And you really do because you're like, it's like the bedrock 3.7 billion years old or something like this. And it's just like this infinite and very softened landscape which have been sculpted by the eons. I mean, it's like, it's an incredible landscape, and there you actually feel atomized. I mean, I think that there's like this moment where you kind of lose really the sense of your body or of your scale because it's just so impressive. And in Antarctica is even greater maybe, but because you have this kind of like pressure and set of rules, it's a very different experience.
Talking about regulation, I don't think Dr. Fauci would have approved of you collecting breasts during the pandemic. With that, I would like to thank you again, Julian, for...
Thank you.
For, of course, a fantastic expose of your work and all the explanations, but also in particular, of course, for contributing this beauty to our department. So we can now move down. We can walk down, we can take the elevator, whatever you want to do. And then there's food, there's drinks in the lower level, and we can sit there, you can walk around, have more questions to you, and of course enjoy the artwork. Thank you.